After losing everything I had built over 15 years, I discovered a devastating truth. Today, I am going to share it with you, holding nothing back. It contradicts everything you've been taught about success, control, and what really matters in life. When you fully understand it, it will change not only the way you pursue your goals, but also the very essence of who you are. For most of my adult life, I lived under the illusion that I was the sole architect of my destiny. I fervently believed that with enough determination, strategy, and hard work, I could control every important aspect of my life. I built business empires, accumulated wealth, and developed an enviable reputation. On the outside, it seemed like I had cracked the secret code to success. But beneath that shiny facade, a constant restlessness gnawed at me from within. It was as if I were running on a treadmill that was constantly speeding up, where each achievement only gave me a few moments of fleeting satisfaction before anxiety about the next goal consumed me completely again. Does that feeling sound familiar? The feeling that no matter how much you achieve, there's always something else you need to conquer to finally feel fulfilled. The inner voice that whispers you're not enough, you haven't done enough, and you don't have enough. On the night I lost everything, literally, everything, I sat on the floor of my empty office, surrounded by boxes containing the last remnants of my former company. The creditors had taken the furniture, the equipment, and even the plants. My marriage was destroyed, my partners had betrayed me, and my bank account was in the red. But the most devastating part wasn't the material loss. It was the realization that my entire identity, self-worth, and sense of purpose had been built on illusory foundations. I had spent decades building a sandcastle, convinced that I was creating something permanent and solid. It was in that absolute darkness, when I had nothing left to lose, that I finally surrendered. I didn't surrender to defeat. I surrendered to control. For the first time in my adult life, I admitted out loud that I had no idea what I was doing. I had been pretending to have all the answers. I desperately needed help from a wiser source. It was at that moment of total surrender that the most extraordinary transformation I could have ever imagined began. Before we continue, I want you to understand something fundamental. What I am about to share with you is not abstract religious theory or shallow motivational philosophy. It is a practical, proven life strategy implemented by the most successful, influential, and accomplished leaders in human history. These leaders include entrepreneurs who built empires that have lasted for generations, scientists who revolutionized our understanding of the universe, and artists who created works that continue to inspire centuries after their death. The common denominator among these extraordinary individuals was not their IQ, socioeconomic background, or level of formal education. It was their conscious decision to subordinate their personal ambitions to principles that transcended their immediate interests. I am talking about the decision to put God at the absolute center of every aspect of your existence. It means recognizing that your life, with all its talents, opportunities, and resources, is not your private property, but rather a temporary stewardship that you have received to multiply and use constructively for the benefit of something infinitely greater than your own comfort. Now, before your rational mind starts generating objections and resistance, let me explain why this decision is the smartest and most practical strategy, regardless of your current religious background. When you decide to operate from this perspective, something revolutionary begins to happen in your decision-making process. Rather than evaluating each option based solely on immediate personal gain, you begin to consider factors that most people never take into account. You consider the long-term impact on your character. You consider how your decisions could affect other people. You consider whether your actions contribute to building something valuable or simply satisfying temporary desires. This expanded perspective gives you access to wisdom that transcends your limited personal experience. It's like the difference between navigating the ocean with only local instruments and having access to a global positioning system that sees the entire picture from an infinitely broader perspective. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works in business. After rebuilding my life on these new foundations, I had the opportunity to invest in a business that promised huge profits in a very short period of time. The numbers were extraordinary. The opportunity seemed legitimate, and all my advisors recommended that I proceed without hesitation. However, when I ran the decision through the filter of my new principles, something didn't feel right. While technically legal, the business model depended on exploiting regulatory loopholes that would greatly benefit early investors but potentially harm customers who did not fully understand the risks involved. My rational mind told me that I was being overly scrupulous and that everyone else was taking advantage of these opportunities. It said that I would be naive to pass up such a chance. However, something deeper inside me warned me that participating in this venture would compromise something more valuable than any financial gain. I decided to decline the opportunity, a decision that my colleagues considered incomprehensibly conservative. 6 months later, the entire industry collapsed when regulatory authorities intervened. The initial investors lost their profits and their reputations. Several of them faced serious legal consequences. But here's the most interesting part. The discipline I developed when I declined that questionable opportunity prepared me to recognize and seize a different, superior opportunity that arose a few months later. Not only was this second opportunity financially superior, but it also allowed me to create genuine value for all parties involved. This experience taught me something fundamental about true success. True success isn't what you can get by violating your principles, it's what you can build by keeping them intact against all apparent logic. Maintaining high principles tends to create more opportunities, not fewer. Why is this? Because when you operate with consistent integrity, you develop something extraordinarily rare in the modern business world: a reputation for absolute reliability. Absolute trustworthiness is perhaps the most valuable asset anyone can possess in any field. When people know they can completely rely on your word, know that you will follow through on your commitments even when it is inconvenient, and know that you will act with integrity even when no one is watching, you become the kind of person others want to partner with long term. Here's something few people understand about exceptional opportunities. The best opportunities, the ones that can transform your life and impact on the world, are rarely publicly advertised. They are passed along through networks of trust, from person to person, among individuals who have consistently demonstrated that they can handle important responsibilities with integrity. When you build your life on divine foundations, you naturally become part of these networks, not because you're calculating how to access them, but because your way of being attracts people who value integrity over convenience. However, I want to be transparent with you about something. This transformation does not happen immediately, and the initial process can be deeply uncomfortable. When you start applying divine standards to your life, you'll quickly realize how many aspects of your current existence are misaligned with these principles. You may find that some of your relationships are based on mutual convenience rather than genuine respect. You may realize that some of your income sources depend on practices that compromise your integrity. You may recognize that many of your daily habits are motivated by selfish impulses rather than constructive purposes. Confronting the reality of your current life can be unsettling at first. It's like turning on the light in a room that you've been navigating in the dark. Suddenly you can see clearly, but you can also see the mess you didn't know was there. However, it's important to understand what this initial destabilization phase means. It's not a sign that you're on the wrong path. Rather, it's a sign that you're beginning to see possibilities that were previously hidden from you. It's similar to the temporary pain you experience when starting an exercise program after years of inactivity. It's uncomfortable, but it's evidence that your body is responding to the training. The key during this phase is to not let the temporary discomfort deter you from continuing the process. Each day that you uphold these new standards, even when it's challenging, you're cultivating inner strength that will eventually make maintaining these standards feel effortless. I want you to understand something important about spiritual strength. It's not something you develop once and then forget about. It's like physical fitness. It requires ongoing maintenance. Every day you make decisions that can either strengthen or weaken your spiritual strength. But here's the beautiful thing about the process. Each time you choose to do the right thing, even when it's difficult, you're acting with integrity in that specific situation and strengthening your ability to do so in more challenging situations in the future. It's a cumulative process in which each act of faithfulness to divine principles prepares you for greater responsibility and opportunity. It's like a spiritual ladder where each step gives you access to the next level of possibilities. Here's something that may surprise you. When your life is genuinely aligned with divine principles, extraordinary synchronicities begin to occur. Connections you couldn't have planned for materialize at the perfect moment. Resources appear exactly when you need them. Ideas come to mind that solve problems you've been facing for months. I'm not suggesting that this is magic, nor that you can use spiritual principles as a formula to manipulate the universe in your favor. What I am saying is that when your life is aligned with the natural flow of divine purpose, you collaborate with forces that transcend your capacity for planning and control. It's like the difference between rowing against the current of a powerful river and learning to navigate with it to reach your destination more quickly and efficiently. The river represents the spiritual forces constantly operating in the universe, forces you can either resist or learn to collaborate with. Let me tell you about an experience that perfectly illustrates this principle. Several years ago, I was working on a project that required expertise I didn't have. I searched for months for someone with the exact skills I needed, but I didn't find anyone. One afternoon, while waiting in line at a random coffee shop in an unfamiliar neighborhood, I struck up a conversation with the person in front of me. It turned out that this person had exactly the expertise I needed and was looking for the exact type of project I was working on. That fortuitous connection turned into a collaboration that lasted several years and benefited both of us in ways neither of us could have anticipated. But here's the interesting part. Had I been in my usual obsessive control mode, I probably would have been too anxious and distracted to engage in a spontaneous conversation with a stranger. I was able to be present in the moment and recognize the opportunity precisely because I had learned to relax my need to control every variable. This is one of the most beautiful paradoxes of building your life on divine foundations. When you stop desperately clinging to control, you gain access to a much more powerful and effective kind of influence. When you stop obsessively chasing success, success begins to find you in ways you could never have orchestrated on your own. However, I want to emphasize something crucial. Relaxing your need to control does not mean becoming passive or irresponsible. In fact, it requires a higher level of personal responsibility, not a lower one. You must become impeccable in the areas you can control: your character, preparation, attitude, and willingness to serve. Taking full responsibility for these controllable areas allows you to relax your anxiety about the uncontrollable ones. The end results: other people's decisions and unpredictable external circumstances. Combining maximum personal responsibility with relinquishing control over outcomes creates an extraordinarily effective and deeply peaceful way of operating in the world. I want to address something that may be concerning you right now. You may be wondering, does this mean I have to become religious in a traditional way? Do I have to change my lifestyle completely, join a church, or adopt specific rituals? The transformation I'm talking about is much deeper and simpler than adopting external religious forms. It is a fundamental reorientation of your heart and deepest motivations, the source from which you make your most important decisions. You can keep your current career, relationships, and habits. What will change is your perspective, the purpose that guides your actions, and the source of strength you turn to when facing challenges. However, it will require specific changes to your daily routine. These changes may seem insignificant, yet they will have an extraordinary cumulative impact on the quality of your life. The first and perhaps most important change is to begin each day by acknowledging that your life, opportunities, and resources are trusts given to you to multiply constructively, not random accidents. This can be as simple as spending the first 5 minutes of each day expressing gratitude for your blessings and asking for divine guidance in using the opportunities that present themselves during the day wisely. You don't need elaborate words or complicated formulas. Just speak from your heart with the same honesty you would use when talking to a trusted friend. Share your concerns, hopes, and plans. Then remain open to impressions, ideas, or simply a piece you can't explain rationally. This simple morning ritual can transform how you experience the rest of your day. Rather than starting from a place of anxiety about everything you need to accomplish, you will start from a place of gratitude for what you already have and confidence that you will receive the guidance you need to handle any challenges that arise. However, there's something important you need to understand about communicating with the divine. It's not a monologue where you talk and then wait for specific, detailed instructions. It's more of an ongoing collaboration where you keep your heart open to subtle impressions that may come in the form of sudden ideas, unexpected opportunities, chance conversations, or an intuition about how to proceed in specific situations. The key is to develop a growing sensitivity to these subtle forms of divine communication. This sensitivity develops with practice, just like any other skill. The second important change is altering your criteria for decision-making. Instead of evaluating each option based solely on immediate personal gain, consistently ask yourself which option contributes most to the greater good, which decision most honors the principles of integrity, generosity, and service, which path allows me to create the most genuine value for others while building something meaningful for myself. At first, applying these criteria may make your decisions feel more complicated, not simpler. You may have to decline opportunities that seem attractive but would compromise your integrity. You may have to invest time and resources in activities that don't generate obvious, immediate benefits. Over time, however, you'll find that this more rigorous filtering process results in much higher quality decisions. You'll avoid costly mistakes that you would make if you operated solely on selfish impulses. You'll build stronger relationships and create more sustainable opportunities. The third change is to develop what I call a regular reflection practice. Set aside time each week to assess how your recent actions align with your stated values. This reflection should not be an exercise in self-recrimination, but rather a process of constant calibration. When you identify areas where your actions have not aligned with your principles, instead of punishing yourself, simply adjust your approach for the following week. It's like a pilot who constantly checks his navigation instruments to ensure he's on course to reach his destination. Small, constant corrections are much more effective than trying to make dramatic corrections after you've significantly veered off course. Here, I want to share what may be the most counterintuitive aspect of this process. When you start living this way and putting divine principles before personal convenience, it may initially seem like you are sacrificing competitive advantages. Others who are not constrained by these scruples may seem to be advancing more quickly, generating more income, and accumulating more recognition. I have to be honest with you. In the short term, this may be true. However, here's what I've consistently observed over the past 2 decades. People who build their success by violating fundamental principles eventually face consequences that cancel out their temporary gains and often leave them in a worse position than when they started. It may take months, years, or even decades, but the fundamental reality is that success built on flawed foundations is unsustainable. The very characteristics that enabled the initial success eventually cause the downfall. In contrast, when you build your success slowly and consistently on solid foundations, each achievement becomes a stable platform for even greater achievements. You won't have to worry constantly about protecting what you've gained through questionable methods, because what you've built is based on principles that can withstand any external storm. This difference in sustainability explains why some families maintain influence and prosperity for generations, while others lose everything they've accumulated in a single generation. It's not a matter of luck or external circumstances, it's a matter of fundamentals. Here, I want to talk about something that may be especially relevant if you are in a phase of your life where you feel like you haven't accomplished much. You may look at others who seem much further ahead and be tempted to take shortcuts or make compromises to speed up your progress. This temptation is understandable, but it's precisely during these times that it's crucial to maintain your principles. Here's something I've learned about divine timing. Apparent delays often prepare you for opportunities that would overwhelm you if they came before you were ready to handle them wisely. I've seen people receive massive success before developing the character necessary to handle it. In most cases, that premature success became a curse rather than a blessing. It destroyed them personally, damaged their most important relationships, and left them worse off than before. On the other hand, I've seen people who developed solid character during years of seemingly slow progress. When their opportunities finally came, they were prepared to maximize them. They handled success in ways that blessed themselves and everyone around them. So, if you feel like you're in a preparation season rather than a harvest season, view that season as an invaluable investment in your future, not wasted time. Each day that you choose to act with integrity instead of compromising, choose patience instead of forcing immediate results, and choose to serve instead of being served. You are building the exact kind of character that will be required to handle higher levels of success and responsibility wisely. I want you to understand something important about true success. True success is not simply the accumulation of personal achievements. True success is becoming the kind of person who can create lasting value for others while building a meaningful and fulfilling life for yourself. This definition of success requires a delicate balance. On the one hand, you must be ambitious and hardworking. You must develop excellent skills and create real value in the marketplace. On the other hand, you must maintain a humble perspective. You must be willing to sacrifice immediate gains for long-term principles and keep the well-being of others as a fundamental consideration in all your decisions. This balance isn't achieved through simple formulas. It's achieved by continuously aligning yourself with divine principles that provide the wisdom to navigate complex situations in ways that honor your personal development and your responsibility to others. Here's something that may surprise you about the practical benefits of operating from this perspective. When people perceive that your motivations are constructive and that you care about their well-being as well as your own, you develop a kind of influence that money cannot buy. People trust you more deeply, collaborate with you more enthusiastically, and refer opportunities to you more frequently because they know working with you will benefit them. This genuine trust is perhaps the most valuable asset anyone can develop in any professional field. It cannot be manufactured or faked. It can only be developed through years of consistently honest behavior. However, there's something you need to understand about developing a reputation for absolute trustworthiness. You must be impeccable, not only in big decisions but also in seemingly insignificant details. It means showing up exactly when you say you will. It means delivering exactly what you promise, even when it's inconvenient. It means being completely honest in all your communications, even when the truth might temporarily disadvantage you. While these behaviors may seem obsessively perfectionist, they are strategic investments in your long-term credibility. Every promise kept, every commitment honored, and every expectation exceeded makes a deposit in a trust account that will eventually provide access to extraordinary opportunities. I want to emphasize something important here. This reliability should not be motivated by a calculating mindset, where you are honest only because you expect it to eventually benefit you. Rather, it should be motivated by a genuine recognition that integrity is intrinsically valuable, regardless of its practical benefits. When your integrity is motivated by divine principles rather than personal gain, you develop an authenticity that people can sense intuitively. That authenticity is what creates deep and lasting influence. Now, I want to talk about something that can be particularly challenging if you are in a situation where you need quick results to solve urgent problems. You may be facing financial pressures, relationship issues, health challenges, or other problems that seem to require immediate solutions. In these situations, the temptation to compromise your principles for quick relief can be almost irresistible. However, I've learned the difference between lasting and temporary solutions. Solutions that result from compromising your principles usually create more problems than they solve. They may provide immediate relief, but they often establish patterns that lead to more difficult situations. In contrast, solutions that you achieve by maintaining your principles may take longer to materialize, but they solve not only the immediate problem, but also the underlying causes that created it in the first place. Let me give you a specific example. A few years ago, I met an entrepreneur facing a cash flow crisis that threatened his business's survival. He had the opportunity to solve the problem immediately by participating in a technically legal but ethically questionable transaction. Instead, he chose to be transparent with his creditors, propose a realistic payment plan, and commit to working tirelessly to meet his obligations while maintaining his integrity. Some creditors were frustrated with this approach, but others were impressed by his honesty. They accepted the payment plan and decided to invest additional resources in his company. These new investments resolved the immediate crisis and provided the capital needed to significantly expand the business. 2 years later, his company was larger and more profitable than before the crisis. But here's the most important part. The character he developed during the crisis and the reputation for absolute integrity he established with everyone involved became one of his most valuable assets for decades to come. That reputation opened doors to opportunities that would never have been available to someone who had resolved the initial crisis through questionable methods. It also provided him with an inner peace that allowed him to operate with confidence even during periods of future uncertainty. This story illustrates a fundamental principle about divine solutions. They often take longer to unfold than human solutions, but they typically resolve multiple problems simultaneously and lay the foundation for long-term prosperity. Here I want to address something that may generate internal resistance as you listen to me. You may be thinking, this sounds beautiful in theory, but I live in the real world where people don't always operate according to these lofty principles. It's a world of fierce competition, where being too ethical can be a significant disadvantage. This concern is valid, and I won't minimize the real challenges you face trying to act with absolute integrity in a world that often rewards less scrupulous behavior. However, I've discovered something about the relationship between integrity and competitiveness in the real world. In the short term, maintaining high ethical standards may cost you certain opportunities. In the long term, however, it builds a type of competitive advantage that is extraordinarily difficult for others to replicate. When you develop a reputation for absolute integrity, you gain access to an ecosystem of people who operate according to similar standards. Within this ecosystem, opportunities for collaboration, business referrals, and capital investments flow in ways unavailable to those with purely selfish motivations. It's like the difference between operating in a commoditized market where only price matters and operating in a premium market where quality, reliability, and service create meaningful differentiation. When your personal brand is based on demonstrated integrity, you're no longer competing solely on price or convenience. You're competing in a completely different dimension where you have natural advantages that others can't easily duplicate. But I want to be clear about something. Developing this integrity-based competitive advantage doesn't happen overnight. It requires years of consistent behavior before it becomes firmly established in the perceptions of others. During this time, you may encounter situations in which adhering to your principles appears to cost you immediate opportunities. These moments are the most important tests of your commitment to this approach. Each time you choose integrity over convenience, you are making a deposit in your long-term reputation. Eventually, those cumulative deposits will become an asset that generates extraordinary returns. I want to share something that can provide perspective during those moments when sticking to your principles seems too costly. I have noticed that the most successful and satisfied people I know all have stories about pivotal moments when they chose to do the right thing, even though it seemed financially irrational. In hindsight, those seemingly irrational decisions became the turning points that laid the foundation for all their subsequent success. This is not because they were immediately rewarded, but because they established patterns of character that created opportunities that would not have otherwise existed. It's like planting a tree. The planting process requires work, time, and resources with no immediate visible benefit. But after years of growth, the tree provides shade, beauty, and possibly fruit, which is worth infinitely more than the initial investment. Similarly, every act of integrity you perform, especially when costly, plants seeds for future opportunities beyond your current imagination. Now, I want to talk about what may be the most transformative aspect of adopting this approach to life. It impacts your inner peace and your ability to enjoy building your life, not just the end results. When your life aligns with divine principles, you experience something extraordinarily rare in the modern world: deep satisfaction in working toward your goals, regardless of whether you've achieved them. This satisfaction does not come from self-deception or settling for less than you want. Rather, it comes from the deep knowledge that you are investing your time and energy in activities that have eternal meaning and are contributing to something much greater than your own temporary comfort. When you know your daily work aligns with divine purposes, every day feels meaningful, even when you don't see visible progress toward external goals. This is because you understand that true progress is not always visible externally. Often, the most important growth happens in your character, wisdom, and ability to handle greater responsibilities. This internal growth eventually manifests as external opportunities and achievements, but it operates on a timeline that doesn't always coincide with your preferences. Learning to trust this divine timeline and find satisfaction in the process, regardless of visible results, is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Here's something beautiful about developing this skill. When you're no longer anxious to speed up your results and can be present in the current process, your work becomes more effective. Anxiety about results often interferes with the quality of your work in the present moment. When you relax that anxiety because you trust that you are on the right path, you can focus all your mental energy on doing your current work excellently. This total presence in the moment allows for creative breakthroughs, innovative solutions, and unexpected connections that often result in quantum leaps of progress. I want to emphasize something important here. Trusting in the divine timeline should not turn into passivity or a lack of ambition. On the contrary, it should free you to become more ambitious. When you no longer have to carry the anxiety of making everything happen on your own, you can pursue bigger, more meaningful goals. You can take smarter risks because you trust that, even if something doesn't turn out exactly as planned, you can transform it into something constructive. The combination of increased ambition and reduced anxiety is extraordinarily powerful. It allows you to operate from a position of strength, abundance, and confidence rather than desperation and fear. These qualities are magnetic. People are naturally drawn to individuals who operate from a place of strength, abundance, and confidence. They want to collaborate with them, invest in their projects, and form partnerships with them. Thus, the paradoxical result of relaxing your need for control is that you gain more real influence. Trusting divine principles makes you more effective at achieving human goals. However, there's something you need to understand about this transformative process. It's not linear, predictable, or comfortable all the time. There will be periods when you feel like you are making rapid progress. Everything will seem to align perfectly, and opportunities will appear with surprising frequency. These periods are wonderful, but you shouldn't depend on them for emotional stability. There will also be periods when you feel like you aren't making any progress, when doors seem closed and your patience is tested. These periods are just as important as periods of visible progress. because they develop qualities you will need to handle success wisely when it comes. The key is to maintain your commitment to divine principles regardless of the period you're experiencing. Don't let temporary success make you forget its source, nor let temporary delays make you doubt the validity of your chosen path. Success and delays are both tools used to mold your character and prepare you for greater levels of impact and responsibility. I want to share something that can give you tremendous hope if you are in a period of apparent delay or difficulty. Some of the most significant breakthroughs in my life occurred immediately after the most challenging periods. It's as if pressure builds up during difficult times. When the pressure is finally released, the resulting progress more than compensates for all the waiting. However, this accelerated progress is only possible if you maintain your commitment to the right principles during periods of pressure. If you use difficult times as an excuse to compromise your integrity, then when the pressure is released, you won't be positioned to take advantage of the opportunities that arise. However, if you use difficult times as opportunities to strengthen your character, then when opportunities arise, you will be prepared to take full advantage of them. This explains why some people emerge from crises stronger than before, while others emerge weaker. It's not about the external circumstances they faced, it's about how they chose to respond to those circumstances. I want you to know that, no matter what crises you have faced, what mistakes you have made, or how much time you feel you have lost, it is never too late to start building your life on divine foundations. In fact, people who have experienced significant failures are often better positioned to appreciate the value of sound principles than those who have never faced serious consequences for poor decisions. Failure can be an extraordinary teacher if you are willing to learn from it. It can teach you about the consequences of building on faulty foundations, the importance of principles that transcend temporary conveniences, and the difference between superficial and substantive success. Here's something that may surprise you. Some of the most successful and influential people I know have stories of devastating failures in their past, but those failures didn't destroy them. They used them as catalysts to re-examine their foundations and rebuild on a more solid footing. Their past failures became credentials that made them wiser, more empathetic, and more effective at helping others avoid similar mistakes. What appeared to be their greatest weakness became one of their greatest strengths. So if you feel you've made significant mistakes, wasted valuable time, or started later than you should have, I encourage you to see those experiences as invaluable preparation, not wasted time. Everything you've experienced, including mistakes and failures, can be transformed into wisdom that will make you more effective than you would have been if you had an easier path. For this transformation to happen, though, you must be willing to honestly examine the decisions that led you to where you are now, the principles you followed or ignored, and what you can learn from these experiences to make better decisions in the future. This process of honest self-examination can be painful initially, but it is essential to ensure that you do not repeat patterns that caused past problems. Here is something important to understand about learning from past experiences. It's not about punishing yourself for past mistakes. It's about extracting wisdom to guide more effective future decisions. Excessive self-recrimination is just as counterproductive as complete denial. What you need is an objective analysis of what worked, what didn't, and how you can do better in the future. Once you've learned the lessons from past experiences, you must let go of guilt and resentment toward yourself. Holding on to those negative emotions will only interfere with your ability to apply the lessons you've learned. When based on genuine regret and a commitment to change, forgiveness toward yourself is not irresponsible indulgence. It's a practical tool that frees you to focus all your energy on creating a better future instead of punishing yourself for a past you can't change. I want to emphasize this point, which may be especially important if you have struggled with feelings of shame or unworthiness related to past mistakes. Your value as a person and your potential to contribute meaningfully to the world are not determined by your past mistakes. Rather, it is determined by your present willingness to learn, grow, and align your life with principles that can create lasting value for yourself and others. I have witnessed extraordinary transformations in individuals who began from seemingly hopeless situations. I have seen people completely rebuild their lives, relationships, careers, and impact on the world after failures that seemed terminal. In every case, however, the transformation began with a decision to surrender control and admit that they needed help from a wiser source. They began building on foundations that could support the weight of a truly fulfilling life. That same transformation is available to you, regardless of where you start or what obstacles you currently face. All it takes is your decision to begin. You don't need a complete plan, you don't need to understand how it will work, and you don't need to feel prepared. You just need the humility to admit that your previous approach hasn't given you the fulfillment you seek, and the faith to take the first step towards something better. That first step can be as simple as taking 5 minutes tomorrow morning to acknowledge that your life is a gift to be used constructively and to ask for divine guidance in using the opportunities that present themselves during the day wisely. It can be as simple as deciding that before making any important decisions over the next week, you will ask yourself which option contributes most to overall well-being, not just your own. It can be as simple as committing to keeping every promise you make over the next 30 days, no matter how inconvenient. These steps may seem insignificant, but if you implement them consistently, I assure you that you will begin to experience changes in your life that you cannot imagine from your current perspective. When you align your life with divine principles, you're not just making superficial adjustments to your behavior. You are connecting with forces that can transform your external circumstances and the essence of who you are. Once it begins, that transformation has the power to impact not only your life, but also the lives of those around you in ways that extend far beyond what you can see right now. Your decision to put God first is not just a personal one. It can influence your family for generations, create value in your community for decades, and contribute to solutions for problems you don't even know exist yet. This illustrates the magnitude of the impact a life aligned with divine purposes can have. This opportunity is right in front of you, waiting only for your decision to begin. The question is not whether you are capable, because with divine help, anyone willing can experience this transformation. The question is not whether you have time, because each day you delay this decision is another day you delay living a life of purpose, peace, and impact. The only real question is whether you are willing. Are you willing to surrender the control you never really had? Are you willing to trust a wisdom greater than your own? Are you willing to build your life on a foundation that can support everything you dream of becoming? If your answer is yes, then all you need to do is start right now, today. Take the next step. Your life of extraordinary purpose awaits on the other side of that decision.